Hi everybody, here we go again. Here's video lecture 2, and I'm going to be covering the main points in chapter 1 and 2. Before I get started, I wanted to mention, to avoid confusion, what's going to happen on Sunday. So I'm going to be covering these two chapters right now, quickly, hopefully under 7 minutes. And then what you're going to do is you're going to read, I'm going to send you an outline touching the main point. You should pick up on the two chapters, and then I'm gonna send you a homework. You're gonna watch a movie. It's about, think of an hour long, called The Color of Money. And what you're gonna do, you're gonna grab those two, the reading and the movie, and you're gonna find commonalities. So the book says this, and in the movie I saw this. That kind of relates back to the book. So I want you to do that in a page and a half, as dictated by the syllabus and the expectations on the essay. I've sent you 2 sample essays to give you a pretty good idea. All right, let's move on. Okay, chapter 1, Indian Giver. By now you should have read and give you a context about where Europe is at. Europe, more or less, for the majority of the population, pretty dirt poor. The Americas, depending where you're at, very rich resource areas, and a lot of these native populations are concentrated primarily in Mexico, across some parts of North America. Then we go down south to the western part of South America, and we have the people, the Andean people, the Incan being one of the most recent groups previous to the arrival of the European. So we have this rich part of the world, isolated, developing their own forms of looking at the world, transforming their environment into material goods. To them, gold, silver, they're beautiful things to decorate their tools with, their walls with, their churches with. Europe's is next to Asia, or basically they're the same place. It's just a huge landmass, Eurasia, what I call it. They got Africa, rich. Middle East, rich. India, rich. China, rich. Europe wants a piece of that. So what happens? They run into what I would consider a very vulnerable population that across time has made itself vulnerable to diseases. Now it gets a little more complex than that, because see, with a population, usually if an infectious disease like right now we're experiencing is vulnerable, a certain percentage of them, particularly the old and the very young, tend to be afflicted, and they tend to pass away because of that reason. But the difference here now is that these folks are actually invading and displacing people. So that means that not only are the old and the young vulnerable, but the productive, the young adults, the productive part of the tribe, the nation, becomes vulnerable, because you're displacing them. And they don't have access to the water they used to have. They don't have access to the housing they used to have. They don't have access to the crops, things that sustain their societies. They no longer have access to that. So their populations become more vulnerable towards diseases as they get hungry, as they get weaker over time. Worse yet, you take them, you enslave them, and then eventually, they pass away prematurely. Now, that is the motivations at the beginning, the first at least 200 years since 1492, where they, particularly the Spanish, they're running all over these continents throughout the Caribbean, Central America, southern part of the United States, Western South America. They're trying to grab as much gold and silver as possible, enslaving the native populations, working them to death. This is the first glimpse of what we're going to see as the New World Order. See, for about 5,000 years, we've been kind of chugging along at a slow rate, materially speaking. Certain parts of the world are developing, they develop their cultures, they come to their epitome, to the top of their cultures, and then they collapse. But this is the very first time where we're going to see a dramatic turn, and it's going to be the first spark is going to be the transfer of material wealth considered valuable by rich societies like China and India. And in this case, it would cause a collapse in sub-Saharan African societies. That means those folks who no longer had to provide or were the ones that were gaining value from Europe for trading their gold and their silver, it was shut out. That means that the free American, practically the free slaved American gold and silver, is coming to Europe at such low cost that is causing an inflation or deflation of the gold and silver that was coming in from Africa and other parts of the Middle East. Those societies would begin to collapse because they were wholly dependent. Kind of like today. Today, societies that depend wholly on oil. Once the oil runs out, then if their society didn't invest in other things that are proved valuable that they can export out, they eventually will collapse. So I want you to just pay attention to the reading, because there's a couple of things that are brought up. As this gold and silver is coming in, that means that the people are trading this gold and silver, and for the very first time you have more and more people having gold and silver in their hands, and now they're investing. Some of them are investing. Some of them are like the kings might be building their armies bigger. They might be bringing more steel or other goods and services to create bigger armies. Those armies are sent out overseas to bring more and more. So you begin to see this sort of domino effect, where where native societies are vulnerable as they're being displaced and they're dying in the millions. So that's chapter 1. Okay, Potosi is brought up as at the beginning of Indian Giver, the Silver Mountain. So I'm going to continue with chapter 2 in this next couple of minutes.